Hello and welcome to Super Great Kids Stories, wise tales from storytellers around the world, which will make you laugh and sometimes cry. Recommended for ages 5 to 105. I'm Kim and I love stories. Hello, Super Great Kids, and how are you? My reason to be cheerful is that we've been working on a new Super Great Kids colouring book and it'll soon be ready. Hurrah! And it's November and today we have an Anansi the Spider story for you, told by Wangari from Kenya. I imagine Anansi was rather busy being a trickster this Halloween. Did you know that people in different cultures have contrasting ideas about spiders? In West Africa, spiders are like Anansi, tricksters, and likeable rogues. But in Japan, they're seen as evil demons in disguise. And according to Cherokee legend in the US, Grandmother Spider is clever and thoughtful and wise. She was the one who brought light to the world. Amazing. Anansi stories, as you may well know by now, are particularly popular in both Africa and the Caribbean. Today's storyteller comes from Africa, so before we hear our Anansi story, can you have a think about how many African countries you can come up with while we have a quick word with the grown-ups? Ready? Off you go. Hello, Super Great Kids. I'm back. So, that was a tough one. How did you do? How about Ghana, which is in West Africa? What other countries can you think of? What about South Africa and Nigeria and Zimbabwe and Egypt and, of course, Kenya, where Wangari, this week's storyteller, is from? See if your grown-ups could think of any more. Now, back to our Spider-Man. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's give a warm welcome to Wangari.
Hello, Super Great Kids. My name is Wangari the Storyteller. I live in a city called Nairobi. And Nairobi is the capital city of my country, Kenya. And Kenya is found in East Africa. Now, I love stories, and I tell many stories both to young people like you and also to older people. And today, I am going to share with you a story not from my country, Kenya, but from a different part of Africa, West Africa. Specifically, I will take you to Ghana. When we go to Ghana, we find a character called Anansi. And Anansi is a very crafty spider. Now, our story involves some magic. And of course, as you know, we can't make magic without some magic words. So are you ready to learn some magic words? Here you go. You have to open your mouth very wide and your ears even wider. When I say, boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, 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 I would like you to say, chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Let's try it out and do your best. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Amazing. And now, when I say, chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, 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 I think you already know what to say. What do you say? You say, boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. So let's try it out. Are you ready? All right. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. And chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. I think we have comfortably landed in Ghana, and we take a bus all the way to a city called Accra. And here we find Anansi the spider. Now, something about Anansi the spider. Anansi the spider loved to sing. Anansi the spider loved to dance. Anansi the spider loved stories. But there's one thing that he did not like. He did not like to work. And he was wondering how he was going to get food to eat without having to do any hard work. And he walked around his house, singing to himself. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. And yes, he remembered a story that he had heard from his grandmother so many years ago. That a long, long time ago in their village, there lived a young girl, a witch, whose name was Five. Yes, that is her name. Her name was Five, just like five, the number. And as you can imagine, when she went to school, other children would make fun of her. They would laugh and giggle, give me a high five. And of course, she didn't like this. And one day she was so annoyed and she said, anybody who ever mentions number 5 will just go boom and disappear. And something changed in Anansi's village. For you see, from that day, nobody ever said out number 5 loudly. Children would not even celebrate their 5th birthdays because when you are asked, how old are you now? What would you say? And Anansi thought, ooh, I can use this story to make myself something to eat without having to work very hard. And the next day, very early in the morning, he took a basket and he went to the market. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Boomalaka, boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. And he bought 5 potatoes. And on the road that went from the village to the market, he made 5 holes and put a potato in each of the holes and then covered them with soil. And every morning and evening, he would come and he would water it. And soon, 5 potato plants were growing from the holes. And he knew that now his plan could be put to work. And he made himself a nice hammock made from webs on a tall tree that was right next there. And he waited for his first trick. And he didn't have to wait very long, for he soon saw Brother Bull going to the market carrying a big basket full of ripe bananas. Oh, and Nancy loved bananas. And as soon as he saw Brother Bull, he jumped down from his bed and said, hello, Brother Bull, how are you? Hello, Anansi. I am fine. And how are you? And my dear young friends, Anansi began to cry. I am not fine. You see, when I was young, I was very sick. So I never went to school and I didn't learn how to count. Brother Bull, can you help me count how many potatoes I have? Of course, Anansi. You are my friend. I will help you count. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and boom! Brother Bull disappeared, leaving a whole basket full of ripe bananas. Ooh, Anansi was so happy, and he took the bananas and went home with them, and he ate them for a whole week. Bananas for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. Oh, he really enjoyed the bananas. But soon, the bananas were over, and he was hungry again. So he went back to his hammock up the big tree and waited. And soon, he saw Mr. Rabbit. And Mr. Rabbit was carrying some juicy carrots. Oh, Anansi loved carrots. And as soon as he could, he jumped from his tree and said, "Hello, Mr. Rabbit. How are you?" "Hello, Anansi. I'm fine. And how are you?" And Anansi began to cry. "Ooh, I am not fine. You see, when I was young, I was very sick. So I never went to school. So I did not learn how to count. Mr. Rabbit, can you help me count how many potatoes I have?" Sure, I will help you. Stop crying. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and boom! Mr. Rabbit disappeared, leaving the carrots behind. Anansi took them and went home with them and ate them for 3 full days. And that is what Anansi would do. Every time he felt hungry, he would come and he would trick an animal and he would take whatever they were carrying. Until one day, Mrs. Guinea Fowl was on her way to the market. Now, the guinea fowl is a bird that looks like a chicken, but is slightly bigger and is really beautiful with black and white spots on its body. And she was carrying a basket full of eggs. And she had heard stories about how Anansi had tricked different animals in the forest. And so, when she approached where Anansi had planted the potatoes, she was very careful. And she looked around. And she didn't see Anansi. So she walked past the first potato and looked around. There was no Anansi. Second potato, looked around. No Anansi. Third potato, looked around. Do you think she saw Anansi? She did not see Anansi. Fourth potato, still no Anansi. But just before she could go past the last potato, Anansi jumped down. "Hello, Mrs. Guinea Fowl. How are you?" I'm fine, Anansi. And how are you?" And Anansi began to cry. "I am not fine. You see, when I was young, I was very sick. So I never went to school. So I didn't learn how to count. Mrs. Guinea Fowl, can you help me count how many potatoes I have?" Now, Mrs. Guinea Fowl knew that she had to think very fast. She didn't want to lose her eggs. So she said, okay, as she scratched her head. "All right, Anansi, I will help you count how many potatoes you have." And Mrs. Guinea Fowl went and stood on top of the last potato and sat down on it and said, "Anansi, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the one I'm standing on." Of course, that was very clever of her. But do you think Anansi was happy about this? No, he was not. And he said, "Mrs. Guinea Fowl, that is not how you count. Can you count properly?" "Of course, Anansi. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, and the one I'm sitting on." "Come on, Mrs. Guinea Fowl. Is that how they taught you in your school? Can you come here and count properly? Count properly." And Anansi was getting angry. And the guinea fowl said, "Well, Anansi, if you know how to count better, why don't you come here and show me how to count, and then I will count?" And Anansi said, "This is how you count. You say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And of course, you know what happened next. Anansi went boom, and he disappeared. And Mrs. Guinea Fowl was so happy she took her basket of eggs and continued her walk. And as she was walking, she could be heard singing Anansi's song. Boomalaka, boom, boom, boom. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Chingalaka, chingalaka, ching, ching, ching. Boomalaka, boom, boom, boom.
Thank you very much for listening to that story. That Anansi, what a scamp he is. Have you learned the magic words? Could you try making your grown-ups disappear and see if it works? No, just joking. Now, we really love hearing from you. So, it's time to dig deep into our bag of happies and say some thank yous. Thanks first to the new owlets who've been fluttering into our nest. Ooh, 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 ooh. And hello to Dylan, who is turning 6 this month and has received a subscription to the Owlets Club as a birthday present from his grandmother Sandy. Dylan is from the UK and he's currently living in Pennsylvania in the US. Lucky you, Dylan, experiencing not one but 2 cultures. Dylan loves listening to Super Great Kids stories with his little brother Caden and his little sister Seren. His favourite story is The Giant Turnip. Hoo, 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 hoo. Welcome, Dylan. Hope you have a happy day when it comes. And hoo, 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 hoo. And hello to new owlets Laura, River and Willow. And hello to subscribers from Los Angeles in California, Elliot and Lola. Elliot loves the super great scary stories and particularly likes Molly and the Skeleton. Hoo, 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 to you. That is a scary one, isn't it? And hoo, 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 and welcome to 4 children living in Utah in the US. Jane, who is 10, Sarah, who is 8, Evelyn, who is 6, and William, who is 4. Evelyn has drawn a great picture of the ghost of the bloody finger with a big floaty ghost and a big puddle of blood. Eek! And hoo 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 hoo, and welcome to Ray, who is 4, from Mount Glorious in Australia. One of his favourite stories is Long Red Fingernails and Ruby Red Lips, told by Amy Douglas. Another scary story for subscribers this week is also told by Amy Douglas. The Cow Who Ate the Piper. Look out for that one. And thanks very much for your kind tips on Ko-fi from Atticus and Dahlia, who listen to Super Great Kids stories on big road trips and to and from school. This summer they drove from California all the way to British Columbia in Canada, which was 3 days of driving, and they listened to stories most of the time. Wow, that must be a record listen. Well done you. And thanks to Ko-fi donors Ev and Ethan, who like the super great scary stories and the hummingbird and the forest fire. And thanks to Tristan, who is 8 from Sydney in Australia, who enjoys all the stories by Toop and Tienen. So, a very big thanks to all of you who've been supporting us on Apple, Patreon and Ko-fi. We rely on your donations and subscriptions to help us keep producing Super Great Kids stories and to pay our storytellers. If you'd like to support us, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon, which you'll find on our website at supergreatkidsstories.com. And now, you're all so good at drawing, it's very difficult to choose. But here are my picture picks for this week. Thanks to Beck, who is 5 and was born in South Africa and is now living in Auckland in New Zealand, who drew a bright, happy picture from the Scottish story The Dog and the Peacock. She's drawn all the animals sitting around a blazing fire. Beck would like to know why the story isn't called The Dog, the Cat, the Peacock, the Owl and the Little Old Lady. Well, Beck, I think it's because it's not quite short and snappy enough for a title, but fair enough. And Amaru, who is 9 and from Durban in South Africa, has drawn an amazing pencil picture of a cobra from the story How the Snakes Got Their Poison. Just an amazing and terrifying picture. Thank you very much, Amaru. And Moses, who is 4.5 from Hillsdale in New York, has drawn a splendid picture of Loki and the Wall of Asgard. I love all your labels and the huge giant and all the walls and the skyscrapers in Asgard City. Just super great. Thank you. I can tell you've listened to that story a lot. If you'd like to see those pictures and all the Halloween pictures that have been coming in, then go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/supergreatkidsstories. That's it for this week. Thanks for all your pictures and messages. If you liked the bonus story last week, remember you get free scary stories once a month if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon. Bye for now. Keep telling your stories and singing your songs. This podcast was produced in Wardour Studios in London.